The Gold Bug, Chapter 4. "You devil," said Legrand angrily, which is your left eye? To speak the truth, I little enjoyed this kind of work at any time, and at this particular moment cared even less for it, for the night was coming on, and I was already tired from having walked so far that day. But I saw no means of escape, and I also feared that if I refused to help Dick, I might excite my friend and cause him to become angry. If I could have dependent upon Jupiter's help, I would have tried to force Legrand to return home, but I knew Jupiter's character too well to hope that he would help me under any circumstances in a struggle against his master. There was now very little doubt in my mind that Legrand had heard some of the many stories about money buried in this section, and for some reason was under the impression that the particular bug which he had found could lead him to it. Perhaps Jupiter's idea that it was a bug of real gold had started his mind off on this train of thought. A quick imagination such as his might easily be led away by such ideas, especially when it seemed that here was a chance of his becoming rich again and getting back some of the things which had been lost by him and his family. I called to mind that he had said, "These bugs to make my fortune." Upon the whole, I was rather sadly confused by the whole matter, but I finally decided that the best thing to do was to dig with a good well, and in this way prove to Legrand by facts that he was mistaken and that his ideas were those which came from a sick mind in bad need of rest and care. The lanterns having been lit, we all fell to work with an interest that was under the circumstances rather surprising. As the light fell upon us, I couldn't help thinking how strange a group we formed and how unusual our work would have appeared to anyone who by chance happened to pass by. We dug very steadily for 2 hours. Little was said. The only noise beyond that of our shovels came from the dog, who seemed to take a great interest in what we were doing, cried and barked at us at times. His barking, however, became so loud finally that we were afraid it might attract some stranger to the scene, or rather this was the fear of Legrand. For myself, I should have been happy to see anyone who might have brought an end to our work and could have helped me to get the madman home. But the noise was finally silenced by Jupiter, who, getting slowly up out of the hole, tied up the dog's mouth with his belt, and then, very much pleased with himself, returned to his work. When the 2 hours mentioned had finally ended, we had dug down into the ground to a distance of about 5 feet, and yet no treasure of any kind was to be seen. We then stopped digging for a while, and I began to hope that we had come to the end of our evening's business. Legrand, however, although apparently much confused, wasn't yet ready to give up. He wiped his forehead slowly as though in deep thought, then began again to dig. We had dug and opened up the whole circle of 4 feet across, originally marked off by Legrand, and now we made this circle even wider. We also dug 2 feet deeper. Still nothing appeared. Legrand, for whom I really began to feel sorry, climbed up out of the hole. His spirits, as could easily be seen, were very low. Slowly he put on his coat, which he had thrown off at the beginning of the work. Meanwhile, I said nothing. Jupiter, at a sign from his master, began to pick up the shovels and other things we had been using. This done, and the dog having been freed of the belt tied around his mouth, we turned in deep silence toward home. We had taken perhaps a dozen steps in this direction when, swearing to himself, Legrand walked suddenly up to Jupiter and took hold of him by the throat. The surprised negro opened his eyes and, mouth wide, let fall the shovels and fell upon his knees. "You devil," said Legrand angrily, "you fool, speak, I tell you. Answer me this minute, without lying, which is your left eye?" "Oh my God, master, well, isn't this my left eye for sure?" cried the frightened Jupiter, placing his hand upon his right eye and holding it there as though afraid his master was going to strike him in that exact spot. "I thought so. I knew it. Good," cried Legrand, letting the negro go and making a series of wild and happy jumps into the air. Jupiter rose from his knees and, unable to believe what he saw, looked first from his master to myself and then from myself to his master. "Come, we must go back," said Legrand. "We're not beaten yet." And he again led the way back to the same tree. "Jupiter," he said, "when we had reached the foot of this tree, was the skull nailed to the branch with the face out, or with the face looking down toward the branch?" "The face was out, master, so that the birds could get at the eyes, good, without any trouble." "Well, then, was it this eye or that eye through which you dropped the bug?" Here Legrand touched each of Jupiter's eyes. "It was this eye, master, the left eye, just as you told me," said Jupiter, pointing very clearly to his right eye. "That will do, we must try again," said Legrand. "Here, my friend, in whose mad ideas I now saw, or thought I saw, some signs of method, removed the stick that marked the spot where the bug fell to a second spot about 3 inches to the west of the first position. Taking now the measuring cord from the nearest point of the tree trunk to the stick, as before, and continuing along this straight line to a distance of 50 feet, he reached a new spot which was at least 10 feet distant from the point at which we had been digging. Around this new position a circle, somewhat larger than in the first case, was drawn, and we again set to work with the shovels. I was very tired, but hardly understanding what had caused the change in my thoughts. I no longer found the work so difficult or unpleasant. I had become for the moment very much interested, even excited. Perhaps there was something in the strange but decided manner of Legrand which impressed me. I therefore dug with new strength and interest, and now and then caught myself looking for, as though really expecting to find, some buried treasure of one kind or another. At a period when such thoughts were in control of my mind, and when we had been at work perhaps an hour and a half, we were again interrupted by the loud crying and barking of the dog. His actions in the first case had been apparently the result of his wish to play or have some fun with us, but his barking now took on a much more serious character. When Jupiter tried again to tie him up, he fought against it, and jumping down into the hole with us, began to dig away with his front feet into this loose ground. In a few minutes he had uncovered a pile of human bones, which were, as it seemed, the bones of 2 complete bodies. There was also some dust of a strange color, which might have been what remained of the clothes of these 2 persons. 1 or 2 more strokes with the shovel turned up part of a large Spanish knife, and as we continued to dig deeper, 3 or 4 pieces of gold and silver money came to light. At sight of these, Jupiter became greatly excited and happy. but the face of his master still remained serious. Legrand asked us, however, to go on digging, yet the words were hardly out of his mouth when I tripped and almost fell, my foot having caught in a large ring of iron that lay half buried in the ground. We now worked with even greater interest, and never in my life did I pass 10 minutes of more tense excitement. During this period we had fairly uncovered a long chest of wood. It was a box about 3.5 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 2 feet deep. It was strongly made of very thick wood. Long metal strips also ran along the top and covered all of its 4 sides. For this reason, the chest was still in good condition, though it had apparently lain buried in the ground for at least half a century. On each side of the chest near the top were 3 rings of iron, 6 in all, by means of which a strong hold might be taken by 6 persons. Together the 3 of us tried to raise the chest by use of these rings, but its weight was too great for us, and we soon saw that it would be quite impossible for us to remove it in this way. Fortunately, the top of the chest was fastened by only 2 small iron rods. These we were able to draw back without too much difficulty, and the box stood open before us. All 3 of us were now shaking with the wildest kind of excitement. A treasure of the greatest value lay shining before us. As the light of the lanterns fell within the hole, there was a reflection from the great piles of gold and jewels that was almost more than the eyes could take in or believe. I shall not try to describe the feelings with which I looked on the scene. My surprise, of course, was very great. Legrand appeared to be worn out from excitement and spoke few words. Jupiter's face for some minutes was as white as it's possible in the nature of things for a Negro's face to get. He seemed confused, unable to think or move. Soon he fell upon his knees in the hole, and burying his naked arms in the treasure, let them remain there as though enjoying the pleasure and feel of so much gold, all piled up together at the one time and place. At last, as though speaking half sadly to himself, he said, "And all this came from the gold bug, the pretty gold bug, the poor little gold bug about which I talked so bad. Aren't you ashamed of yourself, Negro? Answer me that. It became necessary at last that I should wake up both master and servant to the need for removing the treasure." It was growing late, and it seemed clear to me that we should get everything done before morning. It was difficult to say exactly where to begin. Much time was passed in talking over various plans. So confused were the ideas of all of us. We finally made the chest lighter by removing about 2/3 of the things in it. Then we were able still with some trouble to raise it from the hole. The articles which we had taken from the chest were hidden among the bushes, and the dog left to guard them with clear orders from Jupiter neither to move from the spot for any reason, nor to open his mouth until our return. We then hurried for home, with the chest reaching the house safely at 1 o'clock in the morning. Worn out as we were, it wasn't possible to do more immediately. We rested until 2 and had something to eat. We then started for the hills, armed with several large boxes which by good fortune we found outside the house. A little before 4 we arrived at the hole, divided what remained of the treasure among the 3 of us, and leaving the holes unfilled again, set out for home. Here at the house we again put down our treasure of gold and valuable stones, just as the first signs of day were appearing from over the tree tops in the east. We were now dead, tired, worn out completely, yet the excitement which we all still felt wouldn't let us rest too well. After a troubled sleep of some 3 or 4 hours, we all got up as though by arrangement in order to examine our treasure.